Hello, everyone. Welcome back to season 2 of the Women in My World podcast. And today we're flipping the script a little bit. I'm going to be interviewing Shari. Normally she is the one asking all the questions, so we're going to throw her for a loop and do it ourselves this time. So there's a lot of exciting things happening with the Women in My World. Do you want to share some of the new?
The drum roll. We have launched the womeninmyworld.org, and we are super excited because it is live, and you can go on right now and subscribe, and you'll get 5 days of the Consider the Lilies devotional for free. And we want you to connect with us. We're going to start building this out, and we're going to be launching new content creation. We're going to introduce you to lots of incredible women in entertainment and media around the country and around the world eventually. There's so many things that this site is going to be doing. So make sure you go on, check us out, and start sharing it with a friend.
Yes, do it. So this is our new studio that is in the works, which you'll hear a little bit more about in the near future.
Yes.
So, alrighty. First question, as we all know, is what is your definition of success?
Ooh. Well, I love that question, Micah. I think my definition of success is making sure that day in and day out that I am walking in the calling on my life that God has called me to, into relationship first and foremost with Him, and then my family, and then with all of the women that He's called me to walk alongside of. And I think that is just ultimately the definition of success, is to continue to walk out and be in God's will for your life, and do it with a joyful heart. And when you are open to whatever it is that God is calling you to, and you work diligently unto Him, you will see the fruits of your labor. And that ultimately leads to success.
I love that. Love that so much. So how does a boy mom end up starting a women's ministry? And let alone not just a women's ministry, but a women's ministry in the entertainment industry, which is known for exploiting women, known for being male dominant, and for good reason. Like a lot of the jobs in film are, more male oriented sometimes. But how does that come about?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because really it wasn't something that I was seeking out, trying to figure out how to do myself. It really wasn't something. In fact, there's times I joke around, and when God, called me to women, I was like, oh, I think you've made a mistake. I really don't think this is the women you're calling to do this. And really what it was that God just had a different plan on my life. And I think so often when we actually can see things, specifically visions, dreams, ministry, things that are so much bigger than who we are and our ability, then we can really start tapping into knowing that it's a God,
right?
A God vision.
Yeah. Otherwise we would take credit for it.
Exactly. And so for me, it's absolutely, it has to be Him all the time. And there have been many a times that I've kind of fallen back away again from focusing on God's women. And He reminds me very quickly. In fact, I think it'll be funny someday when I go to be with the Lord and people still have my devotionals, they're going to be able to flip X amount of pages and it says, make sure you don't forget my women. Make sure you don't forget. Like God is like so in tune with that for me. But really the way that it started off was, my husband and I were working, we had helped to create a coffee shop called Hebrews, and in our church at Calvary in Phoenix, Arizona. And I couldn't have any more children. Levi was our last, and then went to Hollywood. And in 2009, after starting to work in the industry for a short time, but it was funny because God was always calling me into being in these situations, even when I was on set early on, where I always felt like I wanted to learn something else besides just being in front of the camera. And really was excited about the relationships that I was forming there. And so once we got to Hollywood and I was still there working, I was really struggling in an acting class because I had never actually trained. And so here I was working with the incredible John Kirby and all of these incredible people. And I sat in this little class ready to give up, and God just spoke to my heart and he said, "You're here for my women." And I think that was the moment that I really started to realize that God was calling me to something so much bigger than what I could have ever imagined, because it really did remove me from the situation as an actress or anything entertainment based at all. And really it just put me into perspective that I was to pursue relationship, to really work and love on his women. And so he ended up calling me there shortly after to say to me, you know, "I want you to start a group. I want you to bring women together to praise my name first," always about praising him first, and then praying. And so we went from 2 to 25, and it's now a couple hundred, if not more. And it's just an incredible group of women that I get to keep, that I keep seeing the growth of these women, and specifically for such a time as this, that God is calling women of this magnitude into being the Christ-like followers that he's calling into storytelling, that he really does want to hone in and create those as his leaders and his influencers for him and for the kingdom. And so I just am able now to step in and be part of that calling, and to continue to work with really incredible women that are telling powerful Christ-like stories. So yeah, so much more to come.
I love that. And what keeps coming to my mind, it's interesting. You said like, "Okay, God, are you sure that you want to call this woman to this?" Because that's not what I was thinking. It's, you know, I don't think anybody thought David would be the one killing Goliath. I don't think anybody would have been like, "Oh, Moses," like some scholars think he might have had some kind of like speech impediment. Like, "Oh, he's going to be the mouth to like talk to Pharaoh. Like he's going to be the one to let the Israelites go free." You know, like God really does use our weaknesses, the points where we're like, "Is that really what we have to do?" Like, and he does so much with those. So I love that even in the midst of you questioning it, you're like, "Okay." And he just keeps reminding you every time you kind of want to walk away from it, be like, "It's not for me." He's like, "No, come back, do what I've called you to do, and everything else will fall in place." You can keep striving on all the other stuff, but you're going to run yourself ragged.
Right.
So I love that he does that. So that started, how many years ago was that?
Gosh, well, I think the very first time that I started to see God calling me, well, into the industry, it was early 2000s. But then when he called me specifically to pick up this mantle with women in entertainment and media, was in Hollywood in 2009. And then I started the women's ministry portion of it in 2010. And that looks a lot different than it looks a lot different then than it does now. In 2010, as I started bringing women together, it was weekly in my home. We were studying identity and the attributes of God, and honing in on our talents and our gifts, and really just, focusing on an overall umbrella of identity, whose we are, what is the plan that God has laid out before us? How are we walking in it? And so that's really what and it was week to week. I mean, my house was full every week, and now it looks a little differently, but yeah.
But that's, I think part of it too, is you got to have the small beginnings, but that is what it's about. Like you said, it's about relationship and having community, because this industry is pretty cutthroat, and especially women can get, let's be honest, ladies, we can be competitive and get to where you see everybody else in the industry as competition. And so I think it's beautiful that he's called you to bring women together. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So tell us about this space, going from, having 25 women crammed into your little home in LA to having a space in your home that you're going to be able to create part of the vision that God's put on your heart. I'd love to hear about it. And then how he's just not only been preparing you for this new chapter in the Women in My World, but also even just preparing this space for what he wants to do with it.
Yeah, well, it was funny because when Matt and I moved from Los Angeles, we lived in our home. Our main home was 1,500 square feet. So you can imagine, like, I didn't have a pantry. I didn't really have a closet. Or maybe I should say Matt really didn't have a closet. But I didn't have a whole lot of space to do much. But what we did have, it was always given to everybody that came.
I can attest to that. I lived in one of the bedrooms. That was probably kind of a closet you turned into a bedroom. Not a closet, but it was like a small
It was a
workspace
bedroom
that you turned into a bedroom almost.
Yeah, it was it was kind of the makeshift. It didn't have a closet, so technically, but we always felt like that was the room that no matter what, it was just kind of like this cycling, recycling door. And so we always believed that God had given us this home to open our door to usher in and disciple, or to mentor, or to help guide into the industry. And so you and many other women who came to live in this house. But so then when Matt and I decided, well, I shouldn't say that, because we didn't decide to move to Georgia. God called us to Georgia. So God, because I remember praying that too. I really have come to a place and space where God has to call me out and put me in a place. And I have to be willing to go. And then I have to do life to where he's called me. And it was the same thing in LA. It's the same thing here. And so when we came to Georgia, I wasn't really sure what that was going to look like. And so as we started to, as we really started to grow deep roots here, God gave us a new home. And he gave us a much bigger home. I'm not going to tell you how big, but a much bigger home. And, you all in the South do basements. I don't even know, that was like a new thing for me. So it was like, okay, wait, what are we going to do with all this space? Now, mind you, Matt and I are empty nesters, and it's down to Matt and I and a schnauzer. And so I thought, God, what are you going to do with this? And I just will never forget that Matt and I are sitting in church one morning here at our church, Restoration in Alpharetta. And the Lord, just as clear as day, spoke to my heart, and he said, you're going to birth many more women out of this home. And I'm like, this body, God, is not birthing any more women. So what does that mean? And so very quickly, he started to show me that he was getting ready to do something with this home. He had given us this home and the space to do exactly what we had done in LA, being faithful in the small things. He was getting ready to give us much bigger things. He gave us this home to do more now with women and to help them in this industry, working through this industry leadership. But the other portion of it is the downstairs basement, which we're talking about, and we're actually streaming from. We're going to take you on one of the journeys one of these days through it, is actually almost like a second house. And so what we are doing here is we're actually starting to develop this entire space to become a working studio, so that we can actually employ women. We can train them up. We can provide education and tools and resources, and creating content that actually facilitates discipleship, powerful voices in the industry. And so we can do all these things through this particular space and place down here in this basement, creating incredible content that then can turn back and give back to women again. And so, yeah, I think the way I'll end this is, one of my favorite things is we just did a leadership gathering, and Bev Holloway was here, and she said, I think we should go down in your space, and I think we should pray and sing and write all over. And so we literally came downstairs, quite a few of us, and we walked through this basement, and we prayed and we sang and we cried and we wrote all over scripture verses. And we've really dedicated this space and everything that happens here to the Lord. And so I cannot imagine. I mean, I am like thrilled beyond my wildest dreams of what God is going to do through this space. And every day I'm like, I can't believe that I get to be a part of it.
It's so exciting, and I love it so much. So moving forward, what is your vision? Like, what vision has God been birthing in your heart and soul for the women in my world?
Yeah, that's such a great question. There's a lot to it, but really it comes down to really empowering Christian women in entertainment and media, and discipling them through the process to educate and help facilitate them, to put them in the workspace to be leaders and influencers for Christ. It all comes down to discipleship, education, resources, and really teaming up with others to put these women in places and spaces to be leaders in the entertainment world. We've got to start really curating back the stories that we want our families and others to be a part of, that are really inspirational and faith-driven and character-driven. And so I'm believing that the women in my world are going to be a part of that. And how do we do that? We actually start by creating the disciples and the Christ-like followers first and foremost, educating, providing resources, and then putting them out there to be those that are making the decisions to change the world.
Yeah. I mean, it's the Great Commission to create disciples. And then on
100%.
top of that, specifically women, older women are to minister and bring up the younger women. And that's exactly what you're doing. And I just think it's so beautiful how God has started that. And you probably didn't even know what he was doing at the time. At the time when you had, women in your Bible study meeting on a weekly basis, I don't know that you ever thought it would be, Women in My World is going to have a studio. Oh, it's going to be a full-on nonprofit. Oh, we're going to have a website and all these things.
I know,
and be able to reach people who you may never be able to physically meet in person, but it's going to spread so much further and wider. And I think that's so cool how, God's doing that. And we're so excited to see what he continues to do in that. So I want to know, how does God remind you to keep going? Because let me tell you, spiritual warfare is a real thing.
Very much so.
We've
mentally,
been dealing
physically, and spiritually
with that.
Yeah.
As a lot as of late. But just when you're tired, when you're like, you know what, I would rather go play pickleball. I would rather just hang out with my dog and my schnauzer. Like, what does God do to remind you that you are here for such a time as this?
Yeah, well, I think, he always reminds me first and foremost that he's faithful. He really is truly faithful. And it's being reminded, going in and going through the steps to remember what God has done. It talks about this in scripture where we so easily forget what he's already done in our lives, what the promises have been made, and he's already fulfilled them. And a lot of times it just means we have to wait on his timing. Yes. So that's very tough. But I think what I have to do is be reminded again of his faithfulness. And then also that, this dream, this vision, this, whatever it is, all of this that he's calling to me to is far greater and bigger than I am. And he really is the God of the impossible. So he has to be the one to take us into and launch the Women in My World. He has to be the one to bring financiers to finance content. He has to bring the ones that he's chosen as the women to be those Christ-like followers that he's going to launch out and put them into places to tell stories. And so I need to be diligent to sit back, do the work that I'm called to do on a daily basis, have faith and trust in him, and continue just to walk out and work the plan. And when I do that, that's when I find myself in a really good position to understand that it's all about his timing and his resources and his people.
Yeah, so true. Why do you feel like having Christ-based influencers is so important? Like, what does influence mean to you? How do you think that is going to touch this generation?
Well, I think that Christ-like followers, it's really important because number one, I always think of it this way as like, just even thinking about scripture, the word, first and foremost, we're called to love God first and foremost, and then others, right? And so when we think about that, who are we putting first? And our culture really is saying, put yourself first, be a narcissist, be about yourself. And that's not what God says in his word. It's really about being about God and being about others first, and then he will fulfill through that. And so I think it's important to put people in position that have those Christ-like values so that they can value God, value people, and then we value the content that's being created. It's God honoring, it's family honoring, it's women honoring, it's marriage honoring. We see the depth of depravity all around us, whether it's something that's influencing our children nowadays, just sexuality, immorality. And what we need to do is stop looking at the world and putting worldly figures in those places. We need to take people that really do value God first, and others second, and then our careers. Like those are we need to go through those steps. And I think it's important to walk through that process. Without those Christ-like figures and those influencers, we all of a sudden we're right back to where we are today. I think that's what we're seeing today. We're seeing a narcissistic society focusing within themselves, and really we see the darkness that's prevailing. And I believe really that, focusing on women influencers specifically, there's a lot of incredible men, and I've loved the movement for men, for Christ-like men to be leaders. And I think we're at a place now in this day and age that we have to do the same thing with women. We have to unite with women and be reminded that there are powerful stories that women are going to tell, and that they will also influence the culture, but they've got to be doing it for Christ first, others second, and then the rest will follow.
Absolutely. I love that so much. And I think it's hard in this industry because it is so narcissistic. And then the society right now is very much about self-love and, manifest this for yourself, manifest that for yourself. But it really does lead to such an emptiness. Like, I've experienced that myself. It really does. And I love that. I feel like the way that you approach set, from my personal experience of being on set with you and having experience and watched how you work on set, it really is about serving while being on set. I feel like you talk about that anytime you coach people. I feel like you talk about that, like serving the project, serving who you're working with, serving the story. Like what does being a good servant look like to you? And how is that? I feel like it really is the most liberating thing and the most fulfilling thing is to be a good servant, and that sounds very, very countercultural right now, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, it is. I mean, we've been sold this like really kind of strange, 20, 30 some years of these self-help books. And it's really been a culture, and I'm not saying like, don't take care of yourself and, don't take care of your health or whatever that looks like.
You do need to pour out of the full cup.
100%. I believe being mentally and physically, spiritually balanced is very important. But I do think that the world has taught us, and especially with social media, I mean, let's face it, everything is about a selfie or an image or how many followers or how many likes. And, nowadays, even social media, they can tell what a person's adrenaline, what's happening with an adrenaline and how they go onto a phone to look up the next thing because of how many likes they received on an image. And so whenever we're looking and taking steps as a culture from that perspective, that's about self. And we've been created by a creator we need God. We've been created to need God. We've been created to glorify God, not to create or to glorify ourselves.
Not to make ourselves God.
As God.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's completely countercultural today to be that. And so I think when you serve others, people really do understand how much you desire that you love them, that you respect them, that you want to be in relationship with them. I think when you serve them genuinely, and it has to come from a very genuine spot, you really then start to see a actual authentic relationships, also formed. Because I'll tell you, Micah, like, I think I serve people on set, but I also know that people come back, and when they work with me, they serve me. You are, I mean, beyond measure. You, Stephanie Lanier, like, you women serve me greatly. And I think it's just a love and a respect and a portion that we know that God has created us that way. And we want to do that for one another.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many conversations to have in it, but we've got to get away from this, this world that it's all about me, and I've got to be the success. I've got to be the one in the spotlight. I've got to be, and man, I don't know about you, but when I've done that, I feel like I crumble really fast. But when I put others first, all of a sudden God elevates me like I have never thought that I was going to be elevated.
Right. Well, if I remember correctly, the reason you went to LA because you were going to be a big movie star.
I was like, I'm going to have
opera star.
I was going to be a soap star. Yeah.
And then how did you take that when God was like, you're here for my women? Like, was it an immediate like shift and you're like, oh, I'm so excited about this? Or are you kind of like, but I wanted to be the star. Like, did you have to wrestle with that? Or how did God kind of grow that in you?
Yeah, I definitely had to wrestle with it. It wasn't immediate. I think I fought the charge of being, in this place for these women. I know that women are a challenge. I'm a challenge, and I'm at an age. Ask any husband. I at least know I'm at a place in my life where I can admit to certain things. And and also at the same time, God created us to be these really incredible creatures as well. And so, I went to Hollywood with an expectation because of what I thought God was calling me to, was to be the movie star. And I had it all laid out. I was going to be a soap star. I was going to work 5 days a week. I was going to, have my family taken care of, and I was going to go do my job, and I'd make 6 figures, and then I would come home and I'd have health insurance, and then we would live this great life. And, and everybody would know my name.
Yeah.
And that was really my vision. Like, I was like, that was it. And I love, I think soap stars are huge, but I actually kind of like sit back and kind of like chuckle to myself, because I go, wow, God made me a movie star. Like, what? Like, he did something far greater than I could have ever anticipated. In fact, my little feeble brain was thinking on such a small scale when he did something so greater. But I struggled, and I still, there's times I still struggle in my life, is that, because the enemy creeps in. But the other thing I'll say about this whole thing is what God has shown me, and this is another topic for another day, but these movies that you and I get to be part of, they're ministries. When he called me to October Baby, I remember getting so angry that I had 5 minutes on screen. Who would have thought that I was only getting 5 minutes on screen if nobody else is going to see my mug for 5 minutes? I mean, it was like beyond my wildest imagination, right? And I remember God calling me in that moment. No. And that was the moment that I ended up confessing my sin. And I had no idea what God was going to do. That was 2010, to see what he was going to do in 2012. He launched a ministry. He launched a women's group. He launched me being able to minister to the post-abortive woman, to teenage mothers. I mean, he's created books. He's done far more than I can have ever imagined. Your question was, though, did it take me a while? Yes. Do I still doubt on certain days? Yes. Am I human? Yes. Do I have to stay very tapped in and connected to God? Yes. But I do know that his plan is far greater than mine, like I just said.
For those of you who have not seen October Baby, it's right behind us, go watch it, because you'll hear more of Shari's story, and you'll see how God used those 5 minutes to really make the film a lot more impactful, because it wasn't just about your character on screen. It was about your testimony was woven into that character, and the whole story of how you got to be a part of that, I think, is what really touched a lot of people and sent you out on speaking engagements and really ministering to post-abortive mothers and women. And I think just has really put you as somebody that women trust and go to because of your vulnerability within that. So I think that was really, really beautiful as well. So moving on to, because we need to wrap up here in a little bit, season 2 of the Women in My World podcast.
Yes.
What little spoilers can you give us about this season? What can you tell us about the upcoming season? Whether you share names of who's going to be on or not. I've heard rumors that there might be some of the men in your world coming on as well, which we love all of the men in our world. What do you want to share?
Yeah, well, season 2 is chock full of great content. We're going to have some podcasts where it's going to be fun. We're going to do some really cool things that are a little different than the interviews. We've got great guests. Micah is producing this round, and
pray for me. It's all new.
It's like wrangling cats, getting us all in one place.
Listen, I'm a cat person. I know how to do this.
See, he chose the right one. I'm excited because some of the men in my world who really have influenced me and have cheerleaded me through this process are going to be on. And some of the women that I'm really excited to share even their journeys, just to hear about some of the new projects that they're working on, what God's called them to, maybe out of being a stay-at-home mom, maybe calling them back into being a stay-at-home mom. You never know. But we're gonna be tackling a lot of topics, and then you don't want to miss out, because you're going to be also able to go through. We're going to do some giveaways. we're going to be sharing different highlights on the women in my world. And lots of pre-interviews to new movies and television shows and new books. So make sure you join us.
I think what I'm excited about for this season is that we're going to have a lot of, well, at least a couple women we have in the lineup are more of the behind the scenes people, because I know a lot of, Shari and I are both comfortable in front of the camera, but a lot of women don't want to be in front of the camera, but there's so many places for that. Like we need the writers, we need the script supervisors, we need the producers and the talent agents and the casting directors. Like we need those people. And I think they're so important. I know that's a big part of your heart in this industry as well, as bringing up women in every part of the film industry, you know, because a lot of times the behind the scenes stuff is pretty, physical kind of grueling work that, but it's also very like particular. You have to know how to do it before you get the work. You have to know how to do the work before you get the work. And like, where do you go to learn this? Unless you want to pay thousands upon thousands of dollars for school, which is like, great, do that. But some women, that's not their path, So like, how can we be bringing those women up? So I'm excited that this will be a little bit of helping women who maybe really feel called to the industry, but they're like, but I don't want to be an actor,
Right.
Or like, I don't know where
business
I fit.
Owners. Yeah. Business owners that are making a difference, women business owners.
You have entrepreneurs coming on. So it's exciting to bringing different aspects of the industry all together. So the last thing we're going to do is I asked some of your listeners, your followers on Instagram to send in some questions. So we're going to just go through a couple of those really quick. So let's see. It says, you are such a good actress. I know this is not a question. I just wanted to say it. So really
I love that. Words of encouragement, affirmation, my love language.
Yes. So what has God been teaching you recently?
Gosh, two things very quickly. God has been teaching me, one, to always remember in any situation to take off my shoes and worship first. The war has already been won, but I need to start with worship. And that's something, number one, he's been teaching me. Number two, he has said to me over and over again recently, stop striving and know that I'm God. And I think when the bigger the task is, we strive, and we're a lot of times we even find ourselves in situations where we're somewhat discontent. And so we find ourselves striving even more. And so he was very much to say, stop striving and know that I'm God. And so those are my two things that he's really been speaking to my heart.
Yeah. And I love that. I brought it up before, but your wonderful husband, Matt, has reminded you, like, which I think is so cool, because this industry is changing a lot. And we need a new system in this industry. We need change in so many ways in the country, in this industry, in so many things in the church. But I feel like God just put on his heart, and he shared with you, is like, don't look back, don't look to the side, like just look up. Like we're not doing what we did back then. It's going to look totally different. Like you probably were never like, oh, I'm going to have a studio in my basement. Like that's a thing, So I just think that's so beautiful. And that just plays in my mind a lot, where it's like, hey, don't look back, just look up. It's going to look different. It might be scary because it's a new path. Blazing a new trail isn't easy.
No.
So I just think that's beautiful.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite things, Matt has said to me recently, and it's so encouraging to know that we don't have to look back. We only have to look up to find our resources.
What is your fall Starbucks order?
Oh gosh, pumpkin spice and everything nice. That's like the easiest thing in the world.
You can't help it.
No, pumpkin spice.
Like there's a reason it's so popular. I know it's basic, but there's a reason.
No, it's so good.
Okay, this is from Amber Sterner. Spoiler, she might possibly be on this season later on. She says, how do you schedule your time as a creative, personally and professionally?
Great question. I think specifically as a creative, we're kind of all over the place, right? And so we can get distracted really easily. And so, one thing I will say, I feel like the Lord has blessed me with is, and I always kind of joke around about this, is that I use both sides of my brain. So I'm really a lefty and a righty, but I have to make sure that I'm engaging them at the right times. That's the thing. And so it's being very diligent to get up in the morning and keep my morning routine, staying physically fit, making sure I get enough sleep, getting up in the morning, spending my time with the Lord before digging into my phone, working, really preparing myself for the day. And then I'm a person, I do like lists. I like to go off through a checklist. I like to make sure that I have everything in order. And that's really how I work through that. Now, as a creative, I will tell you there's times that I'm trying to learn to be better, to step away knowing that social media or there's certain things that require my attention for some time. But I like to make sure that I can step away and dedicate that time to it so that when I go back to my other efforts, I'm not distracted.
Mm-hmm. And then the one that we will end it on is, I'm not in the industry. How can I still be an influence to others?
Oh my goodness. Yes. In fact, what I would say to all women and everyone that's listening to this is you are an influencer. And the Women in My World is really about creating Christ-like the disciples, right? That's what we're about. And in today's world, we are all influencers with our voice, with our lives. We're to be salt and light. We are to be the city on the hill. We are influencers. And so no matter where God puts you, no matter what you're doing, no matter what part of an industry that you're in, whether you're a stay-at-home mom or a wife, or maybe you're caretaking parents at this point in your life, whatever that looks like, you are an influencer. And no matter what you think at the end of the day, that you're not in entertainment or media, in reality, you actually kind of are, because you're using a cell phone the majority of the time, whether you're sharing pictures on IG or Facebook or whatever the platform might be. And really, you have an opportunity to influence people day in and day out. Might not be always sharing a gospel message, but just the way that you live your life day in and day out, loving others, serving them, and that in itself is influence.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. Well, we're going to wrap it up here. Make sure you go to the www.womeninmyworld.org. You can learn more about Shari's heart for this. If you want to donate and become a part of it, please do that there. If you know somebody who would want to partner with us and donate, and so that we can create the content and raise up women to be the influencers and give them the tools that they need in their toolbox to become a more Christ-like influencer. You can share all of that there and keep up with us there. So you can keep up with the updates, sign up for the newsletter. We'll be posting there on our Instagram at the womeninmyworld.com. Well, not .com, but at Instagram.